Good morning, everyone. It's my honor to introduce our speaker and his lovely wife. They both are responsible. Nancy doesn't take as much responsibility as she should for having participated in all of this, but she was certainly involved as well. So these windows were installed here during the remodel of Waller in 1989. And there are 16 windows. 8 of them are new, and 8 of them are restored windows that were here previously. And if you'll look at them carefully, you will have a hard time telling which are new and which are old windows. And that's part of the skill in stained glass, is to be able to match those up. And Gary's going to talk about that in detail. But let's fast forward from 1989 to 1999. I was working at the university at the time as director of campus safety, and we had a committee that met weekly and would talk about various events coming up, celebrity speakers coming in, Colin Powell, Sandra Day O'Connor, all of these kind of high-profile celebrities that we needed to manage when they were here. Most of the time we were doing much more simple, mundane things, and one of them was to review appeals that came in to our scheduling policy. Somebody wanted a building to use it after hours or something, and we would talk about these things. And so Alice Sorensen, who many of you know, used to be in ICL. She was the director of scheduling and came into the meeting that day and said she had an appeal from a couple who wanted to get married here in Cone Chapel. And we had a very, very strict policy at the time. You either had to be a current student, a current employee, or an alumnus to get married in the chapel. No one else could use it. And so as Alice was introducing this, we were all already rolling our eyes, getting ready to vote no, that there are no exceptions, when she mentioned that the couple was the people who created the windows for the chapel. And so we softened pretty quickly on our strict policy. And I said, well, I'm supportive of doing that, but I'm going to abstain from voting because they're my cousins. So. Their request was approved, and this June, 26 years ago, they were married right here in Cone Chapel. So Gary's going to talk in detail about the removal of the windows, the repair of the windows, the matching up of the commission he got for the new windows. So I won't talk any about that. I'll just give you a little more information about Gary's background. So when he isn't making stained glass windows for the past 49 years in his business in Gates, he was the fire chief in Gates, volunteer fire chief in Gates for 38 years. Which is pretty remarkable. In 2011 was the completion. They had, let's just use the word inadequate fire hall. That's the polite word, inadequate fire hall prior to 2011. And the whole community worked together fundraising and ended up completing that fire hall. And it's also a community center, a beautiful building there on the Santiam River, and they were heavily involved in making that whole project come to life. And I'm happy to report that although a significant amount of the city of Gates was burned during the 2020 fire, the fire hall was saved largely because of Gary and some of his firefighters' efforts to make sure that building didn't burn. But during that fire, they did lose their house, and they have been through a long and an arduous process of rebuilding a new house on the same property. Fortunately, did not lose Gary's stained glass studio, which is an outbuilding from their house, but they did lose their house during that time. So in addition to his volunteer work as fire chief, he's currently working with the Santiam Canyon Wildfire Relief Advisory Council, which was formed by the Santiam Hospital. And in the 4.5 years since the fire, that organization has raised $4.5 million to help support members of the community. What have I forgotten? I don't think there's anything of significance here other than to introduce Gary and welcome him for being here.
Is this on? Can you hear me? Okay, good. I'd forgotten most of that stuff happened in my life, so thank you for the update. I appreciate that, Ross. Go ahead and start that. Is it? Oh, I've got them. I've got it. This one right here? No, that's my car key. I'm looking.
You can advance it.
No, I don't have that one set up. I have the handheld one set up.
Is it in your?
No, that's where. Wait, hold on. I forgot I had it too. See what happens when you do it this way? Well, welcome everybody, and thank you for coming. This is a wonderful opportunity to share with you what took a year of my life to do. And I'll share some data with you in a little bit about how many hours it took to paint all these windows that we would play, everything involved in that, because I think it's interesting factoid information. I've always loved this space. As an artist and as a person, I find great peace here and tranquility. I will come in here anytime I get a chance. So I need to talk to Ross about getting one of those credential cards that you slip through the door, and I will be overjoyed to have that. So we're going to talk through the windows today, how they were made, and we'll show you a series of pictures that are from another project I did, because I didn't take pictures in my shop of any of the restoration we did. But it will work the same way because the process, other than sometimes little things, is basically the same. We'll talk a little bit about tools we use to do our work, how the original artists got the effects they got in the windows, and try to give you some interesting information. So let's dive in. I pushed it.
You have to come, so you have to be facing that.
I have to what?
You have to be,
How am I doing, Coach? Maybe I roll it. Maybe I don't do anything. Anyway, you can see, here's the title. This has about 6 hours in it of just pure hard work. Now am I okay?
we'll switch it out and you can just use this.
Oh, I'll give this back to you.
But then just press the forward.
Talk amongst yourselves. Don't worry about what we're doing.
Press the forward key on here.
Pardon me?
Just press the forward key on here.
Oh, okay.
Or let me put this in there first.
Push forward. Okay. So I'll carry this. I'm not serving food, okay? But I hate a lectern. I love to move around and face-to-face with people and talk, because I think that's a better way for all of us to retain information. Okay, so I can do it now, right? Wow. Thank you for that. 4 years of college right here, okay? So we're starting out by actually looking at this building. It has a fascinating history. Just a couple of things I think were relevant, because if those couple of things wouldn't have happened, these windows maybe wouldn't have been worked on. So it took 3 years to construct this building. It was a multi-use facility. It had a little chapel in this area. The president's offices were here. Other organizations as part of the campus had offices here. But there was a fire in 1919 that pretty well took care of the building. And of course, as you would expect, because it has become historically the oldest functioning building in a university campus west of the Mississippi. So the administration recognized their school was critical and they needed to rebuild this building. It was an anchor point for the facility. So they restored it in 1921, was the first renovation. We're going to see if this works. Beautiful. Then there was a second renovation. As you know, buildings wear down, things change, get old. Thank you very much. In the mid-1980s, the administration decided that there was a lot of work that needed to be done on this building to bring it up to standards, to code, and make it better, have a better use for everybody involved. So the second floor chapel, which is where we are now, was an area that was targeted for some extensive work, structurally and so on. There were windows donated. A couple of windows came in at that time. The others existed in an entryway in the old building, which is since, of course, gone. The plan was to restore the existing windows and add 9 new ones. I was contacted by the, I guess it would be the vice administrative person, to find out through Payne and Setecase, who were the architects, if I would be interested in doing the work. And I said, well, I'd take a look at it and see if it was within my scope. Restoration is a little bit of a specialty when it comes to windows, and not everybody does it. So they contacted me. We signed a contract in 1988. On 9/29, it was rededicated October 20th, 1989. I said 89, I meant 88. So that's what brought this space we're in to fruition. So we needed a project description as part of my responsibility of the person that was going to work on these windows. So I sat down with the committee and I said, what exactly are you seeking in this project? And they said, well, we want to restore all the old windows. What you're looking at there is one of the new ones. We need you to design the new windows, and we'd like you to build them. There are people out there who will just design projects like this, pass them on to a studio to actually do the work. But they told me that it was these 3 things we wanted to accomplish. So that's the direction we moved in. One of the first things you do as an artist, looking at a situation like this, and it's not all that unique because there are a lot of places who have existing windows, but they want to add some windows, but they would like them to match up to a reasonable level. So we have to choose the correct type of glass. The old windows are, I'm going to back up if I can. Nope, don't do that, Gary. How do I back this? So what?
The backspace. No, the back arrow.
Back arrow. No. Now I got it. Of course, once you got, you need that. The exercise is good for all of us. Okay. So you have windows, and if you can just glance somewhere and see, there's several different kinds of glass in these windows, as well as different manufacturers. Some of the glass that's used, or was originally used, came from Kokomo, Indiana. The company was called Kokomo Glass. It's one of the oldest continually operating glass manufacturers in America. The other one is called Wismach, out of Wismach, West Virginia. They've been in business as the #1 old glass-making company. And there's some of their glass here. There is glass here from a company called Spectrum that made glass in Seattle. Eventually, they sold their operations. There is glass here from a studio called Ouroboros, which was also in Portland. And I think there's Bullseye also, which is in Portland. Okay? So we needed to know something about the glass. It's pretty easy to determine that it comes in sheets, a 1/16 to 1/8 of an inch thick, very easy to work with. It varies in hardness. It's just the nature of the beast. There are three kinds of glass. Cathedral glass, which is one color, and I brought some samples today, maybe on the break. You can come up and look at these. The edges are ground. You can't cut your hands on it. So don't come up to me and say, I cut my finger. I know better. This is a cathedral glass. You can look at it when all the lights are on. It has a little pattern on the back, but it is one color. And if this pattern wasn't here, you could see through it. Just like clear glass, only it's gold. The second kind of glass is called variegated. Variegated glass is an offshoot of cathedral glass. It has two or more colors in it, but if the stuff on the back wasn't there, you could see through it too. So these are interesting. You can hold them up to a window or to the lights when they're on. By the way, this piece of glass, in the pictures you're going to see, this is the border on all of the new glass. I still had a piece of it in my rack, and I cut that up last night to have a piece to be here. The one most people find the beauty in is called opalescent glass. It is a combination of different colors, and it oftentimes has a milky base to it. Turn it over, kind of looks the same way, and it is the rich, I call the richest glass, because of what it does when the light activates it. And as you look at the windows later on, you've probably looked at them being in here for a long time, they're full of opalescent glass. It is what the light reacts the most with. This is for something else. Okay? So, moving on, so you're oriented to this, we use various metals in our work to assemble the windows, to hold them all together so they don't come apart. I brought today a couple little pieces of lead to show you what lead cane looks like. This is the matrix that you put around the glass. It's soft, you can bend it. Okay, and you can bend it back any way you want. But you're welcome to come up and look at these. There's another one which is zinc cane. Zinc is very hard. It doesn't bend very easy. I need a certain kind of device to do it. So it's used a lot in windows that have a lot of lateral lines because it's stronger. Okay? We use solder because somehow you got to hold all these pieces of metal together. This is a roll of solder. You heat it. Depending on what kind of material you're working on, etc., you can set your soldering iron to a different temperature so you get nice even heat. We use putty, which you don't want to see because it's just a mess. Putty is a material that is what it is, except it's not very flexible. It has just, once it dries and you mix it up, it just has a little bit of elasticity to it, okay? We use lots of miscellaneous cleaners, glass cleaners, dry whiting, sawdust, all these kind of things are used to clean a window, okay? And I guess you get to ask questions later. There's a lot of glass painting in these windows, especially the symbols, the donor plates. We use vitreous paints to the surface of the glass. We actually paint on it, and it controls the light which passes through the glass, and that's how you create design, okay? They come in multitudes of colors. They're transparent enamels. There's stuff that is not transparent, like black, browns, greens. Those are what you see as the lettering on some of the donor plates and stuff. They're outlined in black, okay? So we're going to talk about how you paint for a second, too, because that's important when we're looking at something like these that have so much painting. It's all handwork, by the way. It's not done with templates, I guess is the word. The original artist hand-painted all their work. And it's interesting because you can walk around and look at the windows that you know are old, and they're different. They're a little different. And that's caused by the fact that maybe more than one artist in the studio painted, Maybe the ones that did the original painting are so old they couldn't see very well. So depending on how you look at a window, it may look different to you. Okay, so we will spend some time talking about glass painting. These are the tools we use. Pointer. Oh, I need my pointer. Thank you. Thank you to my lovely assistant. We use vitreous paints, as I said, and normally what we do, this is what we call tracing black. We call it tracing black because it's used to do a lot of fine lines. Okay? It can also make wider lines depending on the type of brush you use. Catch me if I fall. Okay. This is called a Badger blender. It's made with badger hair. And it has a characteristic within the hair that allows you to use a little brush like this, and you float that on the surface, and using the Badger blender, you take it in your hand and you go like this, on the top of the glass. What? You want to run this for me? I'm sure. I'll just yell slide. Whew. Hi, here we are. There we are. That's this big brush. What it does is it spreads out the paint and begins to deal with the thickness of the paint you want on the glass. So we don't use this brush if we're making fine lines. We use this brush. I'm in your way, ladies. I'm sorry. Curse of the setup. We use a palette knife, which is the second thing in, and that's just used to stir the paint around. You mix the paint, which is very fine powder like flour. You mix that with a number of different things. Water's the most common. You can use milk. You can use, you could use a shot of good bourbon, but it would never get to the paint. Wine will also work as a good liquid to use. And that gives you different characteristics in the paint. Some paints take turpentine. It's the only way they'll dissolve and become fluid. This little stick right here, all that is a fondue stick, believe it or not. Fondue. I use those because they're sharpened to different points. And once the paint's on the glass and it dries, you can mark on the paint and it will take away to let the light come through. So little sticks like that are used to open areas that are large for shading, et cetera, et cetera. So those are the things we use as we do our painting. That's a sample of what this looks like, and you're welcome to look at it later too. This was a reject. I didn't like the way this piece turned out, so it was never used. I'm glad I kept it. That worked out nicely. This piece right here is a piece of opalescent glass. There's the back side of it. It's actually white with just a little hint of gold in it. So you paint on the smooth side of the glass, and you have to decide to match what the old stuff is like. We had to create a pattern, which we did. And then we decide, what do we want to paint first? Because painting one thing first over another creates a different illusion than switching the order. Okay? So all of the lines you see here were done first. And then you fire that piece of glass. So if you can imagine these black lines is the only thing on the glass. So think about white. This has a little fine grid that are on all the pieces that are painted. Some of it's so faint it's really hard to see. So then you paint those in. That's 2 firings. Then you go back. On this piece we went back and we added this blue back here, which is a transparent enamel. It appears and changes the surface of the glass and the amount and color of the light that comes through it. So Now we have blue, we have two blacks. Then we go to another transparent enamel, which gives us all of the bright spots of gold that exist in this. And all these little lines of this decoration were put on when the outline was put on also. Then we take a substance called transparent brown, and we smear all of it over the whole thing. Then we go back with our sticks, with brushes, little brushes and stuff, and we start removing the areas of the brown. See how this now has turned back to the original color, which was white underneath? And because this was covered with the gold, we start removing some of the paint in these areas to let the character of the object on the glass show up more, so it gets highlighted. So that piece there takes about 5 or 6 firings in a kiln, up to, I usually am firing glass around 11 to 1250 degrees, 1230 degrees. Some glass requires you go higher, but you can't go much lower than that. That fuses the paint to the glass. And the only way you can remove any of that is with acid. Okay? That's the only way to get rid of it. You can tell how well an artist fired his work if there are areas and things that are missing. But then the challenge you always tell people is, well, did he not fire it right or did he want it that way? So they both get used. Okay, there we are. Now I'm going to show you a series of some of the symbols in here, and we'll talk briefly about how they were done. Kind of the same idea, but we'll simplify the discussion. Let's start with this one. This is one of the old ones. Anybody speak Latin? I know, but I don't remember what I wrote down in my notes. This may be the one. Doesn't matter, I'll think of it. So here we have opalescent glass around the outside. We have variegated glass around the circle. The inside was painted just like the other one. A whole series of applying paint and removing it. If you look at the lamp, you get the same exact process. Probably to do, these are old, so I didn't get to recreate these, but probably to do something like this is about, for a good painter who does it every day for 50 years, parts of about 5 days. I mean, application of this back here, the background, might have only taken him 20 minutes. So this one over here is about the same process. You work off of drawings to get what you want. You use light tables if you can't see through the glass, so you know where your lines are. Slide. Here's a couple that are interesting within the windows that are presented. Same process. You see it again. You'll see it in all of these. This particular one is the combination of two things. It's the combination of the symbol for the Methodist Church, which is the black cross, and the red flame. Then, at the request of the donor, we put in 2 gold rings interlocked, and that represented their life of marriage. So it became very personalized for these folks. This little thing around here, I don't know, it just seemed to fit into me, and I just scratched all those in with my little stick. This one over here, very interesting history and story. This is all painted the same way. You'll note that there are some letters. If you look close, you'll see them. Ross, I'll get out of your way. There was a lady who lived in Portland back in the 30s. Her name was Isabel Hoyt. Familiar with her? Huh? You're not. Okay, you may have heard the name. She was very active in Portland socially. And she wore hats everywhere. you never saw her without a hat during the day. So we drew the hat in because when she passed away, the family went in and cataloged 300 and some hats in her collection. And the window was left in her memory. So there's lots of stories in the Naked City, as the TV show used to say. Slide. The far one is a meadowlark. These are new. The far one is new. We had a donor. There was a donor that wanted a meadowlark because it's a state bird. Painting process, everything is the same. This one has a story. I'm trying to think where I put the note. I know where it is. Can you give me just 1 second? And I have some information on it. Talk amongst yourselves. Ross may have bagels in his bag, so if you need a snack. I almost had everything. This is called the Oregon Institute building. It was a very, very early building on campus. It became an Indian mission school and then transformed to the first teaching hall at the university. So buildings are always fun to paint because you have to decide, where am I standing to see this? Am I right in front of it? Am I off over here or over there? Because that changes the perspective. So again, you work with drawings and get them squared away. And we'll throw this in. All the symbols were suggested by the people donating them, and they all okayed the symbols. So these were my ideas to create, but maybe they didn't like where I was standing. So there was a lot of involvement with those people. Slide. You're quick with that thumb. This slide's very simple, and sometimes they are. It only has 3 colors in it of paint. 3, 1, 2, yes. 4. We put the heavy blue in here. We line the cross and the circle. This little symbol down here is also I have to say this right. This drawing details the infinity and the Trinity, that the Trinity goes forever. Okay? That's what it's supposed to represent. So at the end, we just put a little bit of our brown paint over and kind of feathered it out so that the blue showed through. The far one is a rose. Again, done the same way. And the reason you're looking at one rose is because the people that wanted to donate it in memory of their subject wanted one rose blooming. So we didn't have to do a whole bunch of little roses in a pot or something like that. So that's why it looks the way it does. Again, this is an older window, so you'll notice that the outer circle is an opalescent glass. It's not a variegated in the sense that the others are. Slide. My favorite. My favorite for our number of reasons. Stories, yeah. In I'll get it. This drawing was created by what's called the SEAL Committee. Do you know the story on this? Anybody? Oh, wow, I love a fresh mind. That's cool. The first state constitutional convention was held in Baker on September 17th, 1857. And in that group, there were about 60 people representing the counties and various areas and things were called together by the governor. And they went to talk about their Constitution. And somebody said, we've got to have a state seal. So 3 members were selected to be the seal committee. We're not talking about the ocean here, okay? That was their job. Their job was to come up with a state seal. It's got so much story attached to it. All of these things they came up with in their little seal committee meeting and later designed it and presented it for ratification. We know, for instance, that there are 2 ships in the seal. One is here, which is like more of a 4-masted schooner. This one is something that had sails, but it also traveled the inland waterways. And they put that in there for commerce, both foreign and within the country. Pioneers came across, oxen wagon. Here's one, there he is. See this little guy right here? It's an elk. There are days you can look at it and you might see a dog stretching its neck. But in the real state seal that was finally configured, it's obvious what it is. That's there because there were so many elk within the state of Oregon, in the rural areas especially. It was a way of honoring the wildlife that we have. The settlers, there's a plow, there's an axe, shock of wheat, to honor the forefathers, I guess you would say, of the state. I'm counting 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Anybody counted those yet? How many? 33. Down this side. And around the other side? 33. Yeah. I've never figured out what those mean. Say it. States what?
Number of states in the union at the time?
Yes. That's what it is. You're right. Number of states in the Union at the time the seal was created. So that makes Oregon number 49. Is that? As a joke, sorry. Again, we have the variegated glass around. Painting. This was done on a perfectly clear piece of glass so that everything you see here is painted. That's what this little light color is. You'll see a little of it in here and this one here. So I get to brag a little at this point, okay? Forgive me. There were no templates. I didn't use any templates in painting this. It was all done by hand. I don't know, I'm kind of a sentimental guy, and I really respond. I respond to things like this historically. Yeah.
Excuse me, Gary, is that a heart containing the center part or those in the?
Not by intention, I don't think. You might know, I don't. My research didn't say anything about that. But I will tell you, if you want to look at this again, go to the Oregon Blue Book. That story is in the Oregon Blue Book, or it used to be. Okay? Good time to sandwich it together. Let's go to one of these, and that'll just make it just right. So this is a full window. This is the one with the state bird. Some of you may see it from where you are. All of this stuff that goes like this right here. Sorry. I know what I'll do. I'll go to this side. All of the stuff around the outside that has kind of a classic bordering on Art Nouveau and Elizabethan design to it. That's all painted. A plate down here that can give information about who it was donated for, who it was donated by, and not everybody wanted to put that information in. But it's done in a nice way that everything inside relates wonderfully to the outside by design. I didn't design all that. It's what was here. What a blessing for me. The structure of the window, let's go ahead and move that forward and then I'll take a break. Structure of the window is very lineal, which makes it very, very classic in design, but it breaks it up nicely for two reasons. Number one, it's strong. These long lines like this that you break up create great strength in a window. Because what bends a window, you'll see them where they bend in or they bend out, they bow. What causes that to happen is that the matrix of the material that you've used and the putty have failed. Okay? Two things do that. Rain, wind, and weight. The overall culprit is simply gravity. So when we build a window like this, we're working to only defeat basically one of those things, and that's gravity, and we can't. It's always pulling that window down. So anytime you see a window that may stick out in one spot, that far, that's bad, but that means that window's moving down, and it has to go somewhere. But these are great original structures and design that the artists and fabricators put in. These just serve to do a nice job of breaking up a long piece of opalescent glass, and they do a wonderful job of helping anchor and create the design within the window. Break, am I right? Quarter till? Is that what you want to do? Okay.
Did you want to take some questions now?
I can, you bet. This is question period 1, so please don't ask me anything political. And I'll do the best I can for you.
Hello, my name's Mark. A lot of people don't know that glass is actually a liquid. It's a vitreous solid, and when you heat it up, it changes, it flows and melts. With all these multiple cures that you had to do with painting it, did the glass change on you? Did it change dimensions? Is that a problem you had to deal with?
Great question. Great question. He's right. Sort of. All respect, Mark. Glass is a crystal substance when it's made. It's full of crystallization. But it is fluid. It can move if those crystals start reshaping and rejoining themselves. So how long does it take for us to notice that shift in glass? Remember when the big cathedral in Paris burned? That long. Hundreds and hundreds of years. We do not see, in our lifetime, I haven't seen anything that I can tell that glass has flowed, because it'll always flow down. It's a structural issue, not the way the glass is made. Oh, well, yeah, fire melts it. It's got to get pretty hot. Before glass will become liquid on its surface, it takes about 1,030 degrees. Interesting, when my house burned, I had pieces of really nice hand-blown glass. I found them. They weren't very pretty. Anybody else? You had.
No, wait till the
Oh, he's got a mic over there, and
people will listen.
huh?
Just wait, because they'll stand up. Use the mic.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Okay, my name's David. There must have been a time when when stained glass making, switched from just using little pieces of colored glass to painting on the glass, I assume. But my main question is, what do you call that style of painting on the
The
glass?
style.
The
It's
technique.
I call it painted glass.
Okay.
I know there are technical terms. I know there are different artist terms, but it's just, if you want to be technical, you would call it surface treated, would be the technique. You find painting clear back in the Middle Ages. They developed, You know, people are just as smart then, in fact, maybe more so than a lot of them today. Did that sound? Okay, okay.
Oh, I bring it up. I bring it up because my great great grandfather was one of the three founders of the Chicago Munich stained glass
Yes.
company or studio. That was it. And they kind of started that style in the Chicago and Midwest area a zillion years ago.
Yeah, and you know, that brings to mind another afterthought. So many of the immigrants brought this to us, set up their studios here, because they brought their skills with them from Europe. Anyone else back there?
Yes, my name is Bob. A couple of comments on the state seal. The union, the motto has changed. It was originally the union. It is now She Flies With Her Own Wings. That was Barbara Roberts' initiative. And then the other thing is the symbol that you were being asked about may be, this is speculation, may be the federal symbol. That federal symbol, the badge, the federal badge, is used in a lot of imagery related to the U.S. government. So it may be that. The question I have relates to the paint. Why doesn't it melt? Why doesn't it burn away? What kind of material is it?
Okay. We showed you a slide, and there's a little jar called a vitreous paint. All it is ground glass and chemicals. They use copper, they use gold, they use selenium, which for green. And what happens is, it's a powder, it's very, very fine, in a state of ground up glass, if you will. So you put it on there, it goes into a kiln, and when you heat it, the powder, because it has a little bit of a moisture in it that dries out, liquefies. It's glass in a powder form. So when you put it in the kiln and it goes to, let's say you're firing at 1150, the glass is liquid on the very, very top thin part of that surface, and it fuses into it, and once it cools, it's locked. You can't get it off. Great question. Whoever, yeah. I don't know who's got the mic. Back there.
Gary, my name's Neil. What you've been showing us are the finest of the stained glass windows, those being ones that are handmade and hand painted. Back in the day, and this would apply to many of you in churches that you go to, you could also order stained glass windows from a catalog. They weren't designed and made for a specific place. So those of you who have hand-painted ones, like you've worked on, Gary, have the most valuable ones.
Yeah.
And so my question is, now that we come to today, are you running out of locations, sources, to get stained glass from, where otherwise you would have ordered them from out of our country?
Good question. The way things are changing, I've thought a lot about that. The people that make the kind of glass that I choose to use is readily available. These are companies that have been in business so long, they've weathered economic ups and downs, they know how to run their factories, and they're still making the same product they did 100 years ago. However, he's really right in one respect. Anybody can get a hold of an old Sears and Roebuck catalog. In the back, at least the ones I've seen, there are pages of designs for little stained glass windows for your home that you can put above a door, put beside your door, you could just hang in a window, and they're lovely. Designs are simple, really simple, and they're nice if you choose the right kind of glass for them. But if you don't, I have to be kind. Let's just say you won't like the result. But the simplicity of a window depends on the designer and what his passions are. And you ask about little pieces. Who asked? Did you ask about that, Neil? No. Somebody asked me about that. I don't remember who it was. Anyway, did that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
This is Lucy. I'm over here.
Hi, Lucy.
I just wonder, can you tell us how you got into this and how did you learn this?
I don't know, how did I learn it? Okay. I got into this because many, many years ago, I taught high school for about 6 years. And even at that point, I was thinking, you know, don't laugh. You'll go to the office. Okay. I got old. I taught in Willamina High School for a number of years. I taught at Eagle Point High School, and I taught at Aloha High School in the Beaverton district. Then I decided I wanted to do something different, so I moved back to Mill City, and my wife at that point and I started a business, sort of a quasi early 70s, was called the Hedge Toad. And we made candles and sold them. I did small stained glass pieces that you could hang in a window. We sold those. At some point, we needed to make a living. So she went into teaching, we went back to teaching, which we had been doing. We closed the business and I started my own studio, just with this grandiose idea that someday I'd be a stained glass artist, not knowing at all what that meant. But I followed that path for a number of years, and in '76, started my own studio after working for a studio in Salem called F&G Glass Company, Glass Studio, for 3 years and managed their business. Started my own and just started, people would come to me once they found out I did it and say, and you start with the small stuff, you don't start with stuff like what you see in here, unless you've gone to a college with a degree in it, or a university, and you've worked in a major studio for years. So I started small and it just developed. I took an occasional workshop, one that was especially helpful I went to in New Hampshire for about 10 days, learning how to do presentations of designs and things like that so that you actually create something on acetate that looks like a stained glass window when you hold it up to the light. Very, very beneficial and fascinating course. Self-taught for the most part, just years of trying this and trying that and asking a lot of questions of people I knew that were better at this than I was, and they were blessed me with their knowledge. So we ended up today. Actually, my studio now is, I'm retired, and I still have 3 churches that I'm working on and 1 hospital. So I guess that's the danger of retiring. You get to pick the projects you want, and you just say, sorry, don't have time or whatever. I get to golf a little more that way. Okay, you've got one, Neil, here. Somebody else over here. I know you got
While I'm
one.
walking towards him, for those of you who have more interest in stained glass, Julie Sloan has a YouTube called The Home of Stained Glass, New York City.
Hi, my name's Dean. I was wondering where the new ones were, as opposed to the old ones. It looks like, this is the old and that's the new, or vice versa?
They're scattered around, and the reason is different artists did the work. And some of the glass, I know there's one back here behind that's around one of the windows. You can't get that kind of glass. They don't make that anymore. So there were different kinds of glasses available years ago. You will also note that just by my own artist hands, I painted things within those windows that look a little different. So it's just kind of by chance. You follow, you know, if you were an artist and you were painting and I hadn't studied under you, I could come close. But you can't duplicate it. It just doesn't happen that way. Go ahead, you got one. And then we'll break.
I
Got
know.
one more, Ross? One more? Okay, great.
My name's Eric. I spoke with you briefly before the program, but I'm going back for my 65th reunion in June at a boarding school in central Pennsylvania where I went to high school, a place called Mercersburg Academy. It has one of those beautiful Gothic chapels you'd find anywhere in the country. It'll celebrate its 100th anniversary next year, but to make a long story short, it has beautiful stained glass windows, and our class gift is to raise the money to restore one of the larger windows entitled Christ the Teacher. But my question is that a dying art in terms of people that know how to make those restorations? Are there fewer and fewer people or businesses in the country that can do that?
You know, stained glass, for so many years was a hobby, and there were very few studios that made nice windows. Not saying hobbyists can't or don't, but there is a difference. Then back about the late 60s, early 70s, it caught fire. Businesses were selling glass, people were getting into it, you know, doing this home stuff and everything else. Well, put 10 years on those people's lives. By the late 70s, early 80s, we had some pretty qualified people. They just happened to be really quick learners, good learners, skilled artists. And then all of the hobbyists, even though you still find them today, the people who did it just for the fun of it in their own mind, stopped doing it. I'm not saying it's hard to find people to do this kind of work, but if you're going to go on the search, know what you're looking for, ask a lot of questions, look for a lot of examples, and probably, out of fairness to everybody, have your pocketbook ready. This is expensive work. Did I answer that?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, you can find them, you just don't find them everywhere like you used to.
And I know what you mean, because we're wondering if we're going to be able to raise the amount of money needed to
I looked
restore
at your
this
window pictures you had, and I'm beginning to wonder too. You better have some deep pockets in your donors. Okay, Ross, that's a good break time. All right. I hope you enjoyed your break. I see some of you chewing, which means you got one of the things from Ross, so I'm glad he distributed those. I was a little concerned. If you didn't get anything from Ross, you're going to have to wait till we're done, because I didn't bring any food. Okay. We're going to go into a little bit more of the technical stuff now as far as learning how these were all made. It's going to be very simple, because it can easily bury in the weeds, and we don't need to go there today, okay? When we are working on a window like this and going to make it, we need some basic tools. There are so many tools that you end up using and that were never made for this purpose. But these are the basic ones that I would have on my glass table anytime I'm working. A glass cutter. They do different things. Here's what everybody knows. It used to be called a red ball cutter. Fletcher made them with a green or a gold ball. They're small, about the size of a pencil in length. They have a wheel right there. A glass cutter has a tube or a handle, and at the end it has a little tiny wheel that's cut out of steel, very sharp. And that's the only part of the process that you ever use that moves to cut glass. We used to hold it like most people. We'll hold it like this, put it on the glass, and you run it along like that. And if you're lucky, you hear just the slightest little sound of crackling. It scars the glass, and the reason it breaks on that line most of the time is because you didn't push too hard, and you know how to handle the breaking of the glass. These little teeth right here were developed long before these styles, because we used to have to do something called grozing, which means if you had a 1/4-inch piece on the outside of your line left from the cutter, the only way to get that off was use this, and you slipped your glass into the appropriate size slot, and you bent it like this, and it would just break that glass away. We don't do that anymore. We got smart. So we developed cutters which made cutting easier because these are tube cutters. That's an oil chamber. You screw this off and you pour some really lightweight cutting oil in there. I don't know why it's called cutting oil. It's just thin. That's the key thing. And it goes down and it comes through here. This head on any of these, when you push down to make your cut, will go in, open a little felt channel that the oil soaks up in and hits the wheel. So as you're cutting, the oil disperses onto the cut, which makes, if the wheel's behind the oil, I hate that. The wheel's behind a bunch of oil, obviously what happens, it eases the cutter. They last longer. These will dull. I can't cut out a whole window with those at all. These are very handy. I use one like this, which is heavy metal. I like the weight in my hand. As I've gotten older, it's just easier to control it. That's just a glass cutter. That's all it is. But they're pretty instrumental to the task at hand. What you see here are what we call pliers, glass pliers. This is I just call that an automotive, a mechanic's tool. Its sole purpose is to grip with strength and make something move, right? Glass pliers are different, and I'm going to use this guy right here to show you. See how wide this is? And it narrows down to where it makes its connection about the last eighth of an inch of that surface. So it's like this. Okay? The purpose of that is when you need to break that little 1/4 inch piece off, you put the pliers here, and when those are open and snug up against the glass, you're controlling the point of energy. So all you do is put it on that little 1/4 inch piece and just go, and that will run out and just pop right off. This one is real heavy. I've probably had this for almost 30 years. The way to what we call run a cut, once you've scarred it, you got to break it. If you can't do it this way, you can tap it, and it will run wherever that mark is. You can tap it with this big heavy knob here, which is so handy because you don't have to reach down and pick up something else. These are run pliers. You use these on things like plate glass that are really heavy glass because you can set this, put it on there and screw this down, and it holds the space exactly where you want it. Doesn't take any squeezing pressure at all. You just snap it off. That's another one of these, slower version, but you can still see how it angles down to a point. Glass? Excuse me, I'm sorry, didn't mean to wake you up. Sorry. Slide. Oh, I didn't use the right word, I'm sorry. This was a restoration project that we worked on at the First Presbyterian Church in Corvallis. These panels are about, if I remember, 32, somewhere in there, and that whole window is probably about 10 feet. So, you know, when you're going to restore a window, be it this or any of these, you got to have a plan. What happens first? What do you do? What's your end-up goal? What are you willing to sacrifice if a bunch of glass breaks and you can't really deal with it? You got to know those things. So this is the most gorgeous window. The slide does not do it justice. But it's Christ with the Lamb and the angels here. This is especially a decorative theological style, I'll call it. You see that in a lot of the really old, nice windows. Slide. Thank you. I've always wanted to say that. So, here's the start of the process. We take out these panels. We had to run up 3 sections of scaffolding. 1, 2, 3 sections, and the lower one was down in a stairwell that went down. So what you do, you just get the glass. You don't necessarily take the glass out of the frame. And these windows, we didn't do that because they were kind of flimsy before we restored them. So you can see these guys are working And they're starting, if you look right here, you see a line, and you can see right up in here, we're taking that whole frame out of that window. And that took 4 people to lift it down the scaffolding. You just get underneath it with 2 guys, one in the middle, one on top, and you just go down. Once it's down on the ground, you can handle it real easy.
How much does it weigh?
You what?
How much did it weigh?
How much would it weigh? Thank you. I'd say one of those big ones was about probably 250 pounds. It's that range. They're heavy. Glass is a heavy substance. The next thing you do, yeah, that's right. You take it back to the studio. What I'm doing right here is chipping away. This one didn't have putty. I was working on taking these moldings out. Okay? You got to expose the glass. You don't want to worry about the frame, other than don't do damage to it and repaint it and sand it. So when you get to this is what it looks like as it's come out. I am lifting the frame off. This is just tabletop. So you begin to see, okay, there's the actual size of my window right there. These are called reinforcing bars. They are put on windows over a certain width, which you solder to the window so that window cannot flex in the wind. The easy way to eliminate the wind is to cover them with some kind of a covering, like you used to use Lexan. I pray for the people who use plexiglass. It's the worst thing in the world. We moved many years ago to covering our windows if the client can afford it, to tempered or laminated glass. All you have to do is wash it. It doesn't fog up. The windows always look nice from the outside. Slide. Once it's on the table, we have to make a drawing. We have to make a template of that window. Because if we just started taking it apart, how are we going to put it back together? Okay? So we lay the window down, we cover it with just butcher paper, slide, and then we take chalk. Most of the time, there are other ways to get the line. Most of the time, it's a box of chalk. There's my chalk. It's grape, by the way, if you want to know. We rub it on those lead lines. We just go like this and we rub it. The lines will show through because they stick up above the glass, right? So then we have a pattern that's probably 90% accurate. If you have this, once you clean your glass to lay those pieces on for the rebuilding process, you don't make mistakes. So you've got to have a pattern. Okay? Here's a little sidebar. Before we built a window for the UU Church, Universalist Unitarian, acknowledge, thank you, good people. Some of you may have been involved in this, I don't know. We drew the pattern with a felt pen of what we wanted. It was so big that we had to use the grade school gymnasium floor. It took up, this will tell you how small it was, it took up about half of the gym floor, and laid our pattern down. And in order to get it approved by the people that were making the purchase, we invited them to come to look at the pattern. It was too big to hang on a wall. So we had a 12-foot step ladder. And they climbed up that step ladder to where they could get almost the same view they would have as if they were looking at it this way. Done that several times. Sometimes that's the only way you can get the results you need. So there's the pattern, and it's not done. What you're going to see is a section of this torn apart. Slide. Okay, we're going to tear the window apart. We start somewhere down in a corner. I seem to lean to the lower left part of a window to start. Who knows why? And you just start cutting and tearing. This is called a lead nipper. It's just like a pair of pliers, only it's a lead cutter, and the head on it If you hold it a certain way, it's perfectly vertical. If you don't, when you cut your lead, the ends go this way or this way. So that's what I'm using here. But it will slide, if you use it right, slides right under the lead and lifts it. And you don't, if you're lucky, you don't break the glass. So this is how we start a process of tearing that window apart. This is a really dirty window. One of my great complaints about churches. They paint sanctuaries and walls, but they never pay attention to what's on everything else. And that's hard, paint's hard to get off. You almost have to scrape it with a razor blade, and that's not necessarily a good thing, because you can chip the paint very easy. Slide. So we cut away this part of that window, and we're working our way up. Now we loosened this, and this lead was so weak that it was very easy to do. We just jiggle this piece with our hands and we work it. We can make a few cuts if we want, and we take it out, and it goes over to the pattern. And there it sits until you're ready for the next step. Slide. Now you can see here where we have cut that whole section down out of that window, and that's the tool we do it with. This is all painted glass. This is opalescent glass out here. Slide. This will show you how weak these windows were. I just took a hold of the lead, which is the corresponding piece over here. I loosened this stuff. I just took a hold of it and went like that, and just peeled that lead right off that window. That's not good. I mean, great for me, right? But it's not good. It's one of the first things you do when you check a window to see how solid it really is. You tap it. You can move it this way if you're gentle. You can also take a pocket knife and you can just slip the blade in here to see how good the putty is. Is it falling out, or does it really have good life left? You can also just sort of try a little lift on a corner. People don't notice those things. And that'll tell you how strong that lead is. And if it doesn't meet certain criteria, you just got to tell the client, it needs to be refurbished. Would you like to do that? Otherwise, remember this. Everybody thinks stained glass windows fall out like a regular window, clear glass. No, they bend. They go way. That's why codes do not require tempered glass in the window, because they don't break that way. But people don't also understand that at a certain point, it all increases in speed, how far it sags down, bends out, whatever the case may be. Slide. This is a little hard to see, and I'm sorry, but here are the pieces, some of the pieces of the window that are laid out, ready to be cleaned. The cleaning process is incredibly technical. It really is. You take distilled water, add a little dishwashing soap to it, soak the pieces. That's all you got to do. If you're looking for a lifetime job that's easy, be a cleaner. You can kind of see here, I'm sorry it's bad, there is a white, if you can see it right here, see two lines? That's dried putty grabbed onto the glass. So when you take it out, you have to get that off. Soaking is the only way to soften it. Then you can literally take a razor blade and just go like this, and it just falls off. But you can't put a window back together if that stuff is there. Slide. So we started putting this thing back together. This tool is a glazing hammer. It is rubber here, pretty hard rubber. This is a plastic, if you will, that's cast. So it has a little bit of weight to it. You don't want it real light. But when you're assembling a window, what you do, let's just use this as an example. It was time to put in this piece because I had built this up to here. No, I hadn't. I built it to here. So you put this piece in. Then you put a piece of lead there. Then another piece, another lead piece. So what you do with this hammer is you seat these into the glass. It's a light tap. And it locks into that channel, which you can look at over here on the table. When you do that to rebuild the whole window, that's the tool you do it with. Oh, there's an interesting friend. What is glass pliers, the right kind? I'm not gripping and twisting. Slide. So that's what it looks like when it's torn apart. This is what it looks like when you've just about finished it. What do you see that's different? You see glass that's clean, no putty on it. You can't believe how much dust accumulates in a space like this. If they have gas furnace or old oil furnaces in a church, that's days in itself to get that stuff clean. So, it has a nice new shiny look, everything's fine, it's all clean, and we're going to finish it by working our way on the rest of the way. Slide. Then we're going to solder that window together. Please do not comment on what this looks like. I learned after this picture, distinctly remembering, this iron needs to be cleaned because it wasn't soldering very well. But everywhere there's a joint, there's one. There's a row of them along here. You use a soldering iron and it goes to 400 to 600 degrees, depending on which lead you're using. And you put solder, which is the roll of stuff over there. Put it on the iron. It flows onto the spots you've fluxed. Flux is an acid that pulls the metal to it, and it also cleans. And you take it away and you get what's supposed to be a good-looking joint. Yeah, that's a decent one right there. So that's the soldering process. Slide. There's the finished piece. So you could become a stained glass worker, right? There's so much I don't tell you. Okay, slide. Oh, something missing? No, we're okay. Let's go back one. So if you have any questions about that process, when we do questions, please ask. There are things, I'm a craftsman at this point. Earlier, I was an artist. You get to wear two hats. Lots of glass workers in big studios only solder. They only lead. They only cut because it's production. It's okay. When you're one man, you learn them all, which makes it more interesting to me. You got to turn these windows over. Once you've soldered one side, right? You can't just pick them up because they'll just collapse. So what you do, could I have my worthy assistant come forth, please? She's going to be my table because this is fun to do. Just hold your arm out, just like perfect. It's a nice arm. You take your window, big scale stuff. We've reduced it down. You put it, it's on the table, right? So I'm going to slide it over halfway. And I'm going to put my hand here to control the weight. This is resting on the table, but this is the edge of the table. And I just go, thank you, assistant. Do that. Now I can control the window. Thank you. She loves applause. Former tap dancer, just actress. You keep the window like this. Now you can do anything you want with it. To turn it back the other way, I would put it against the edge of the table. My hand up here, and I lift. That's all there is to it. But if you don't do that, I have never not done that. I dumped a load of windows in a van once because I didn't tie them in right. So I got to rebuild some nice windows. Now you can jump that ahead. What am I looking? My pointer. And now we will walk. Okay. So the last part of this, I picked 3 projects just to show you. Several things, and I can tell you good stories about them too. This is Corvallis Presbyterian. There's a whole another set. Remember the one I showed you that had Christ with the angels? That is on this wall. So these are the ones we got to deal with first. This was not a difficult project. What went out, didn't do anything to the openings. They were really dirty. Took a lot of cleaning to get this to shine and sparkle. And it was amazing when you put in this one and you stood back and looked at this one we didn't clean yet. Oh my gosh. It's just like a whole new world. It really is. That project we worked on for several years. They raised money as we went along. I love to work that way. If people are saying, well, we can't restore our windows because we can't afford it, and that is true in some cases. And I say, well, let's make it easy on you. Let's do one window at a time. And then they can go and raise the money. We get their window done and we take another one. I think it's a great technique. Most studios on a project like this will come in and take all those windows in that building out at once. And then they're gone for a year. I don't like to work that way. I don't think that's a good way. This is a guy we hired to handle the ladders on the inside of the building. And he's strange. He wears a sweatshirt with a hood a lot. He's kind of bald-headed like I am. But he wasn't afraid of ladders. So that's yours truly. And all I'm doing is going up to check on these up here and make sure before we end it that we got them just the way we want them. Slide. St. Anthony's in Forest Grove. These are big windows, about 44 inches across there, somewhere in the neighborhood of 12 feet to the top. So you have to work on those with a lift. It is a gorgeous sanctuary. A number of the windows in that sanctuary came out of it's the one downtown, the big Catholic church that burned. Say? Thank you. A number of these windows were taken out when they built that church, and they gave them to St. Anthony's in Forest Grove. And they built their sanctuary to put those windows in. They all have this schematic. There's pictures of saints and several pictures of Christ, Mother Mary. They are filled. And how do I get ahead of myself? They have sections. Openers. This is what you don't want to see in opener, so we made new ones for that. What this indicates is that this opens in like this, and it didn't have any rebars. So what that means, and they leave their windows open all summer, okay? What happens to gravity? A chance, and it comes, and that window starts to bow. So we fixed that. We put rebars on all the new sections. It's got lots of nice ornament all the way up. I particularly like this whole concept here with the pillars, and it turns into this nice little arch thing here. They're really well done. We discovered when we cleaned them, there were some where the paint was not fired correctly. So what we did was just found a soft way to clean them so that we didn't repaint anything and we didn't take any paint off the glass. Okay? So that's one of them, and I wanted you to see that to get an idea. Now these on the inside, the bottom of the window came about right here to me. On the outside, we had to use scaffolding, climb up here. We couldn't use a lift because the grass and the flower beds were soft whenever we took one out. My favorite, I should have put a picture in because it is my favorite, was Irish St. Patrick. Am I right? St. Patrick? Who supposedly chased the snakes out of Ireland. And you look at his window, it's gorgeous. His gowns and everything are just incredible. And you look right down here by his feet, there's a snake. It's really cool. one of my favorites. We're doing good for time. One more. Okay. This is St. Joseph Methodist Church or not St. Joseph, in Joseph, Oregon. This is a massive stone church built way back when, and it is just a special place. It has its own personality. It has its own feelings when you're there. And I had a dear friend who grew up in Joseph, one of my lifelong friends, and he asked me to talk to them about the windows and everything. I did, and I said, you know, guys, we've got to get these out of here. They were buckling in places like this. These were not the best shape. They were buckling some of them up in areas up in here, and it's just age. It's just age. It's a lot of years of accumulation. Here's the cool part. Everybody was there the first day we took a window out, and it was one of these on the side. There were ladies there who were fixing lunch. A lot of the guys were around that do the maintenance, and they had to help. Of course they had to help. And I counted on that because I only took one other guy with me because we couldn't lift those. So came time to pull this window. Same process. The molding, not the molding, but what was holding the frame in, we took the molding out and left the opening, and then we just worked it and worked it and worked it until it was loose. Time to get it out. So we had scaffolding, and we went up here, and we got it out a little ways. Then, in order so it didn't fall out, because we had to put the scaffolding so close there was no way we could get to it, we just put some 10-penny nails in so it couldn't fall out. Moved the scaffolding out of the way, did our work with a ladder on each side, and about 140 people. So many you couldn't handle the window. So we had to say, guys, okay, let's work together. We took this window out, and the whole time we started removing and lifting. All of the lovely ladies in the church making lunch came out, and they sat out in the pews, and they started singing and praying while the first window came out. Nancy, did we decide what the song was? Do you remember?
I'm not sure. It might have been Blessed Be the Tie That Binds.
Might have been what?
Blessed Be the Tie That Binds.
Yeah, we think that was the song that my memory says. It could have also been the doxology. The point being, they weren't sure we weren't going to drop the window. And they thought we needed help. And maybe we did because we didn't drop the window. But anyway, that's a great story about this church. So we did this section on one side. Another side had exactly the same section. Different thing in this. A joy to work with. That's one of the nicest family of a congregation I have ever been around. And I've often wondered sometimes about the experiences you have with other people and some of the traditions of where you live. Joseph's a pretty rural country. And all those people are close because they know their neighbors, and it's neighbors helping neighbors on any occasion. They were there that day for us. It was great. So, slide. So I thank you for your very patience and indulgence of me like stumbling. I don't consider myself to be an expert. I consider myself to be well educated and know how to use the knowledge I've got to do this kind of work. And it's so important to me that I'm not working for myself. I'm working for somebody else. And I will give you the best I can of what you want. So this is a joy. There's nothing more pleasurable to me in this work than going out and just talking with people. And I hope that worked for you. Yes, Neil.
So I have a question. If the glass gets thicker as time goes on, thicker at the bottom, and that's how it buckles, does it then get thinner at the top? I mean, can the stained glass windows wear out at the top because the glass is now thinner over 100 years?
Great question. Maybe. It takes a long time for that glass to shift in thickness, and if it's going to shift in thickness due to gravity pulling on it, then what happens to that mass that was on top? It sloughs its way down to the bottom, which means, yes, it does become, over hundreds of years, a little thinner. The studios who tackle the big windows in the cathedrals, they wear gloves. Bearskin never touches. They clean the glass in distilled and filtered water, and they don't touch it. A lot of them, they use, I don't know what the word would be, but they have a word which sends vibrations through the water, and it gradually just lifts the dirt. And that's because that glass is so old. Cool. Anybody else?
I'm Tom. I'm still curious about the manufacturing process for the opalescent glass, how you get all that color in there, but also how you control which colors you get. I'm just, or how much control you have over those.
Perfect question. Perfect, good question. So it's a combination of colors. You choose a base color. Have any of you watched glass blowers? And you see them reach in and gather a deal of glass and then they work with it? The same principle. They have big ovens. They'll reach in and gather a large amount of a color. And they put it on the table, just plunk, and then they spread it out by using tools. And it's hot. And while they work fast, so while it's hot, they say, okay, I want this glass right here. I'm going to use my white as a base. Hello. I turn my cell phone off. Then they'll gather a color, but they're going to use a lot of blue. They'll go to the other oven and they'll gather an amount. They don't always, I think by experience, know how much, but not always. They'll put a glob right on that. Then they take a tool. It's a rod much like this that is stainless steel. It will have a hook on the end of it or some type of thing that would resemble a hook shape, and they'll put it in there and they just start doing this. What are they doing? They're mixing those colors. Okay? This particular glass also has amber, so they'll do the same thing with amber. There is a type of this glass that has some purple in it. There's some that has a little bit of green. And the more colors you get, to a point, the more beautiful it is. The beauty, and if you hold it up to light and look like this, you'll see the separations where they've moved that glass around. And then it goes from there, because it's cooled enough to be a piece. They take two tools and they slide it onto a belt, this wide. It just goes. Did I move yet? It's called a cooling belt. And it will stay on that belt for hours and hours, perhaps 8 hours. When it gets to the end, then it goes to another table and the guy just takes a glass cutter, knocks off all the uneven ends, and there's your sheet of glass. Okay? Yeah.
Hi, this is Ken. I have a couple of questions about the soldering. One, do you ever get any danger of cracking the glass when you're soldering it? And do you use the same soldering technique when you're using zinc? And is there a movement away from using lead for environmental reasons? Sorry about the 3 questions.
Good question. Can you break the glass? Absolutely. You put a 420-degree iron on a piece of glass that's small, snaps. You have to be careful. Soldering is an art. You put flux on the joint, which is the acid we talked about. When you're ready to solder, you reach up and put the solder on the iron. It immediately liquefies. It doesn't run. It stays in place by nature of what it is. And then you put the iron on the joint. That pulls the solder onto the lead, and you take the iron away. So if I'm like this and I put it on there and I go like this and my cell phone rings, I think, oh, okay. Hello, crack. You don't leave it. It's so hot, it'll break it. Second question was, what? Zinc. I use 60-40 solder. I like the stiffness of it. Holds up better over time than 50-50, which is a little weaker. It's not as stiff. I don't find any difference. The difference between the two is the flux that prepares the surface for the solder. Why am I holding this? This is informal time. Anybody else?
Yes, Bob again. Staying with the soldering, I'm impressed by how uniform and smooth that bead of lead is. That's not soldering, it's the imposition of the lead. How do you achieve that? Smooth, uniform bead of lead uniting the pieces of glass.
This piece of lead, if you put it with other lead, is hungry to join with its pals. So when you put that iron here, to begin with, you don't smear it up and down this. You leave it right on the joint. Now there's the right ways to handle that iron. If you have 4 pieces of lead meeting, you may put it on there at a different angle than you do with just 2 pieces meeting. So one way is just the way you position the iron. The second one is years of practice and knowing and watching the solder and knowing when it's flowed and when it hasn't. Get the iron on, just when it has, take that iron away. Because the longer you go, you'll burn right through this piece of lead. And then you have problems. Did that answer you? Good. Yep. You need a mic. Wait. Got one over there? Okay. She's coming.
Yeah, I'm Dean again. So in the older windows, if they're old enough, the lead actually disintegrates? Because
Yes.
you were talking about
Yes.
pulling that piece off, and I thought
Exactly.
there's channels, and if it's a channel, it'd be difficult unless it's
That's
separating
exactly
from
what it
itself.
does.
Yeah.
It just ages and falls apart.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gary, for those who are caretakers of these windows after you restore them and reinstall them, is there a safe way that the owners of the buildings can periodically clean their windows, or would you rather they not touch them?
Yeah, don't use commercial window cleaners. With all due respect to them, they're not dealing with the same subject. Okay? So, what I always tell people, and what I've done over the years, I like a glass cleaner that would be commercial, but I don't want any ammonia in it at all, because the ammonia will darken the lead, make it look gray and really ugly. Just a light, actually for most part, just a light dusting. Don't even use any cleaners. But if you've got something where somebody was standing there, spilled a Coke or something, and you use a little bit of glass cleaner. Be sure you dry them good when you're done. It's that simple. Don't make it a big complex thing based on a bunch of formulas for chemicals. That may do more damage to the window than anybody knows. Yeah.
This is Gwen Ellen. Slide. No.
You're stealing my time? It's your show.
I want to know what it is that's different about the things that you're doing today than the windows in Notre Dame, Chartres, Saint-Sulpice that have been up there for years, and I don't think the lead fell out of those or it melted, so I don't know. Is there something different?
Lead doesn't fall out for the most part. I have found some old windows, fortunately they were simple designs, where little sections of lead about an inch had broke loose and just fallen. They were on the floor. I won't tell you where the church was. It would reflect on who's being their caretakers. But that's a good question. If the windows stay in place, if there's no movement, then minimal stress on the lead. It will age at whatever age it wants to age based on what it's exposed to and the component parts in it, right? So if you're not up there with a wire brush 3 times a year working on your window, they're going to last a long, long time. And there are different qualities of lead products that you can use from different manufacturers. I try to use the highest I can just because I don't want to go back and work on them some more. I'll go back and see them maybe, but so that's things happen slowly, folks. Don't think that, I mean, I've been in and I've repaired windows that started out, if this is a flat surface, I'll show you and I'll show you. And you get down the bottom area of the window, and we got this bulge. Now, if I draw straight, the worst I've ever found was 1.25 inch bulge in a window, right? Usually they're like maybe 1 inch, 1/2 inch, and those indicate to the craftsman he's got a problem he better deal with. May not be the construction of the window, and maybe because the window's not plumb. Okay, you got when you're in this business, that's part of the knowledge you accumulate over so much time. If I have a bow in a window like this, I have 2 choices. I put it on a table, I can heat it with a heat lamp, and if it's not too bad, put a piece of plywood over it with some weight on it and leave it 2 weeks. And it'll go just like that, because it's elastic. But once you've done that, if it decides to bow again, you got to repair it, because you can't always put things back. Lead stretches. If it stretches, you cannot unstretch it. You can't make it tight again. So you can get rid of them, and that's mostly what we do as craftsmen. If we're a craftsman hat, we look at those to see, okay, what in the world is causing this to happen? Could be that the building's leaning. I mean, there's so many things. It could be if it's on a wooden shelf or a sill, that the sill is rotted underneath. And so it's flexing and causing that window to move.
Hi there.
Yep.
Is there yellowing from sunlight? Do these windows yellow from sunlight or change colors from other environmental factors like smog and
No.
No, they
That's a
don't.
no.
They stay the same.
They will change. None of you here, even if you are pregnant with a baby, they will never see it change. It's such an incredibly long process. But they're basically stable in their coloration. And you think about how it's made. You're making heat and chemicals create a substance which, when it settles and cools, it is glass. It's not like your grandma's fruit jars. Okay? It does, but it just takes so long. These are fascinating. You brought up sunlight. I mean, I look back at the hat window. I look at this window over here, although it's not the best. And then I was here one day with Ross this morning at 8:30, and I look at these windows over here. Oh my gosh, you can hardly look at them. The sun just activates them. It's incredible. We done?
We're done. I'm sorry. Thank you very much.
Thank you.